People will tell you all the ways to succeed, and there are lots of videos that will explain how to be successful. I was listening to a video, someone that I very much admire, Alex Ramosi, this morning, and I just started to think, I was like, no one tells you how to actually fail, though. Everyone tells you how to succeed, but I've never heard what failure looks like. And as someone who has pretty much found all the ways that you could fail, and then persevered over them, I'm making this video because if you're on the journey of anything in life, whether it be entrepreneurship, marriage, family, there are many ways to fail. And I think when you understand what those ways are to fail, then it is easier to look out for them. So there are many times where I will be working on something, and some of these kind of failure temptations come into play, and I know how to avoid them now. So I've got 5 ways here that you can quit. So if you want to quit, this video is great. If you don't want to quit, this is good because this will tell you what to look for when you're thinking about quitting. So the first way to quit is to listen to others. So typically if you're starting on anything, or you are, even if it's marriage, right? You tell other people, hey, we're having this problem in our marriage, and we want to, we're having these issues, and we're going through counseling. Some people will say, hey, well, what if you get a divorce? What if you quit? What if you throw in the towel? If you're running a business, there are people who will say, well, that's not really a good industry. That's not a good niche. There are people who say, well, that's very risky. You have a job, you have kids, or you just got out of college. You probably should focus on a safer career path. When I got started in business, I was a photographer. So pretty much the whole concept was that I was a gig-based person that would make a couple $100 a week, and there's no way I could make a living off of that. Well, they're missing context. They don't understand the nature of the thing that you're trying to do, and they're assuming that their life is yours, and so therefore you are playing by the same rules that they are, which is not true. So listening to others typically is not great. Who I would listen to is people who have access to the information that is relevant to your situation. So I've gotten better at choosing who to take the information from. So for example, if I'm starting a pizza joint, I'm going to get all of my information from someone who's already started 10 pizza restaurants. I'm not going to get the information from someone who owns a wing spot, or even someone who's in the restaurant space. I want to talk to someone and get the information from someone who owned pizza restaurants. If it's how to raise your children, I want to ask and talk to people who have successfully raised children, not the people who are successful but their kids aren't necessarily doing so great. So lesson 1 is listening to others. Great way to quit. The second way you can quit is unconvincing yourself that you can do something. So a lot of times you get some energy, you get some momentum, you start working on something, and then later there's just this voice in your head that will kind of sneak its way in and will start to try and convince you that you can't. It's the same voice when you're doing a workout and you're like, I'm going to hit 20 reps. And then on rep 17, you're thinking, well, I probably can only get to 19. There's that voice in things besides just fitness where it starts to try and unconvince you that you can do something. I think working out is one of the best ways to train yourself to counter that voice. I think that's why there's a lot of overlaps between successful entrepreneurs and exercise, working out, is that it kind of trains that. A lot of this, I think, comes down to self-esteem as well. So many times you're saying, oh, I'm not good enough, or maybe I'm not the right talent, or maybe, the interesting thing is that may be true. You may not be best at everything, and that's part of how I think you overcome this idea that you have to be a master of everything. And the way you convince yourself that you can is by realizing that you don't have to know, someone else can know. You don't have to be great at relationships. You can talk to someone that can coach you through your relationship. You don't have to be great at accounting. You can talk to someone that understands accounting really well. So if you want to not fall to, convincing yourself that you can't. Just be conscious and mindful that that voice will try and sneak in over time. Another way to quit is you can expect it to be short or easy. So anything that is actually rewarding, and this is very much a cliche that you hear often, but things are not going to be short and they're not going to be easy, right? They are usually longer than expected. It usually is harder. If you want to go to Florida and you want to go on vacation, it sounds really good. It looks really good on paper. Then you realize the drive is long. You realize that it was harder to find a restaurant because they were closed by the time you got to your destination. The kids were a little bit more burnout than you were expecting. It's going to be longer and oftentimes harder than you thought it was going to be. This even applies to home projects, right? Like you're thinking, oh, I'm going to, put in this flower bed. It's going to take me a couple hours, and it takes you the whole day because you hit an electrical line or something, and now you got to call the city. So don't expect it to be short and easy. If you want to quit, expect it to be short and easy. Another point that I have for ways to quit is getting distracted by something else. This is probably one of my biggest ones. Distractions sometimes can hide in ways that seem like they're supportive of what you're trying to do. So if you want to quit, one thing to do is to just be focused on something and then have something similar come along that looks like a good opportunity and just kind of start to jump towards that or put energy towards it. This to me is like a silent quit, because you may feel like you didn't quit because you focused on something else, but in reality, it was just a way to mask that you were really quitting what you were trying to do. So going back to the workout example, you have 5 sets of some kind of exercise to do. About 2 sets in, you convince yourself that you actually need to do a different type of exercise. And so now you're just going to go to 3 sets and then do 2 sets of something else. Well, that's just you convincing yourself and get with a distraction that's taking you away from your primary goal, but you still feel fulfilled because you got 5 sets in. Now maybe that shift is beneficial for your exercise. In that case, it maybe made sense, but most of the time I think that in business or in anything, you're typically going to be drawn to distractions that look like a quick, easy way to get away from the thing you're actually trying to accomplish and need to accomplish. And you may even get distracted and change your goals around it just because you realize it's an easier goal to accomplish. So be conscious of the fact that your goals are probably hard, and there are other goals or other things that are going to come along that are going to look more appealing because the road may look easier. But just know that the sacrifice is you are giving up the thing that you actually wanted. And sometimes you do need to reframe. Sometimes you build one business and realize that there's another one. But do really thorough auditing to make sure that it's actually the right move and the thing that's going to take you towards your goals, not just a distraction. All right, and the final way to quit is to blame environmental factors. This is what I believe keeps 95% of people from ever accomplishing anything, is they blame environmental factors. Oh, I want to start this business, but AI is now in place and AI has taken it over. That is probably not true. There's probably a perfect use case where AI has not taken over the entire piece of that, and you are just using that as a reason to not do something. You delivered on a bad job for a customer. You did a bad job for them because you had a bad employee. That employee sucked. No, you sucked at hiring that employee. You did not have the right people in place to make sure that employee was doing his job, right? So your business is not failing because of the bad employees. It's failing because of your inability to hold those employees accountable. Another form of this with blaming environmental factors is being like, well, I've got this health issue that is genetic, and there are many times where health issues limit us in many different ways. But there's also an extent to it. So someone who has one health issue may have limited problems compared to someone who has a much more extreme health issue. And so part of that is just having gratitude for the environment that you have. If you have something, then look for how you can accomplish the most with what you have, not comparing yours to what others have. So if you grow up in a lower income place, if you come from a more modest family, and you think that all businesses start with some kind of financial inheritance or some kind of benefit, you're comparing yourself to the top. I like to compare myself to the bottom. I like to say, how high up am I already? How good is my health already? How good am I financially already? Because there's someone out there that is working harder and having to work harder because of their situation, and they're not finding the excuses. And so one way to quit is to blame environmental factors and to find ways to give yourself excuses for what it is that you want to accomplish, which to me is also a huge disservice to people who have real limitations, who have real hard binary things that make them that they cannot do it. People who are, let's say, amputated, they have no legs, right? And you're complaining that your knees hurt. You have legs still. So, and sometimes knees hurt. I've got bad knees. So not saying that bad knees is not a limitation. But always look for how good you have it, not how bad you have it. And I think you'll find that optimism leads you to overcoming your goals and not giving up from environmental factors. Those are the 5 ways to quit. I felt like putting this video together just because I think quitting is easier to do than winning. And so if you know how to quit, then you can know when those opportunities come up to quit, what they look like, and then it's up to you. It's your choice if you want to quit or not. But don't convince yourself that you're not quitting when you actually are.